Ready?
A couple 100,000. I think we got them down 11%.
Okay.
Original.
As I do before we usually do before we start a meeting, get a phone, turn it off or silence it, please. I will call to order the work session for Wednesday, August 15th, 2018 order. Call the roll, please.
Commissioner Shaw,
Here.
Commissioner Mengelberg,
Here.
Commissioner Ide,
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Here.
Mayor Holliday.
Here. So, first up is 18-373 Tourism Strategic Plan Draft Discussion. Mr. Underwood?
Thank you, Mayor. This is our second round for tourism draft plan discussion. We took in the feedback from the last meeting and we made some modifications to the plan. And we want to go over that with you tonight. Tonight is a discussion. We're not looking to approve the plan at all. But we want to get your feedback so we can go back and make further revisions if needed to bring the plan closer to final approval. So with that, I have invited our consultant from Patriot Group, Matthew, who's going to give you a brief presentation. Sorry. Okay. He's going to give you a brief presentation, and then we'll open it up for discussion. If you don't have any questions, I'll go ahead and bring him up.
Thank you, Eric. Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, happy to be here. Just by way of introduction, I don't know how formal an introduction we need for a work session, but I'm Matthew Langhammer, resident of Portland. I am a principal at Coraggio Group and the head of our tour and travel sector, which finds us working with tourism clients, destination marketing organizations right now from San Francisco to New Hampshire. So it's one of our main focus areas. I know you've all had a chance to review this revised draft that's has a lot more content than the previous. We're getting towards the final document here. We wanted to refresh your memory on a few things tonight before we open up the conversation. And I also brought some information that I think might be illuminating around what some other cities have experienced when they sort of take some of the steps that are contemplated in this plan. So unless there's any questions on the setup, I'll go ahead and proceed with the presentation. Okay. Here's what I'm hoping to do from a timing perspective. A few minutes, just recap the process that we went through, the strategic imperatives, which are not new, but just recap those again so they're fresh in everybody's mind. I do want to talk about those implementation case studies from some other cities, and then those recommendations that are made in the plan for Oregon City, leaving plenty of time for Q&A. I hope that's the bulk of our conversation. So the calendar looks like this. Started last June, ended up delivering the original draft plan around the end of November, about Thanksgiving time. Commission got an update then. I believe that was the session held at the library, if I'm not mistaken. We got community input on that draft plan, and in that interim time, Rotator actually began their marketing work too, so that second process came to fruition. We were here in March. One of my colleagues was here, presented in March, and we've made revisions in the interim, and now we're back again. There are 4 strategic imperatives in this plan. The first is build tourism leadership capabilities, which is really about just building the team that you need to promote tourism in an effective way for Oregon City, and enhancing the brand, which is the more marketing-facing side of it. So that's some new branding for the city, activate a branding campaign, and define your visitor further. The third and fourth imperatives are coordinate tourism assets through collaboration and cultivate and curate a portfolio of experiences. I think it's important in these 4 to really talk about what the objectives are. That's the most important. The things that are listed as initiatives, those are important steps, and many of them will be taken in a shorter term, but those can change over time as you learn what's going on through the objectives. The objectives are what tell you whether or not you're tracking towards the success that you want. So the leadership and governance structure is identified. I don't know where this box came from.
Oh, I'll get that, sorry.
Leadership and governance structure identified year-over-year increase in participation in technical education programs. So those would be programs to help, some of your restaurants in town, for instance, learn how to be better ambassadors for tourism and that sort of thing. And any of your partners who wanted to learn more about that. and financial funding model identified. So once those things are accomplished, then that would indicate success towards building your tourism leadership capabilities. Likewise, on the brand one, if your guidelines are established and you have a baseline and then increase in brand awareness through a couple of studies, that will tell you you're tracking correctly there. If you find that you aren't tracking correctly, that's an opportunity to change your initiatives and try something different. On coordinating your tourism assets, we're looking to set a baseline and then increase the percentage of assets sharing common open hours. I think the reasoning for that is probably pretty clear. And then also set a baseline and increase the participation rate in cross-training and collaborative events. And finally, on cultivate and curate a portfolio of experiences, we want to see a growth in visitor spending. That is the ultimate goal of this. And increase the number of itineraries published by third parties. So the more others are talking about visiting Oregon City, the better off you are. These case studies are based on a handful, 3 smaller cities that we've worked with, that I've worked with directly on tourism promotion. And I have a little bit of a different bit of input from each one. The first one I'm going to talk about is Atascadero, California. They're a city of 30,000, so very close to your size. They themselves don't have a major draw for tourism. They are near a lot of things, but they don't have something in their city. They have a really beautiful city hall that they like to brag about. And they have some good stuff, but they don't have a major draw in the way that, say Hood River does. So I think it's a pretty good analog to what Oregon City wants to do. 4 or 5 years ago, we worked with their city council to investigate what better tourism promotion would look like for the city. The recommendation of those work sessions that we did with them came out that one of the most important things they needed to do was add a full-time staff member as a deputy city manager who would focus on tourism and promotion. And I reached out to her for some information on what's happened since she joined. One way to measure that is the transient occupancy tax receipts and how those have trended up since they put more focus on promoting tourism in Atascadero. And you can see that's a pretty solid climb there from just over 800,000 to just shy of 1.4 million over a few fiscal years. It's sort of starting to level off a little bit, but there was a pretty significant increase after Terry came on board. Another way to look at it, because it's not all about transient occupancy tax, and I know that's the case for you, food and beverage is where you make most of your money from visitors. So it's not just about hotels, even though it's a great way to track visitors. But their website has also increased about 20% in both number of total unique visitors and total page views over that span from FY 14-15 to FY 17-18. So a really solid jump in their website visitation as well. And there's more information there I'm happy to share, but I'm trying to keep this brief. San Luis Obispo, California is a little bit bigger than you are, 47,000. And they have a college, Cal Poly is there. They have some other fairly significant tourism draws, but they also have what I think is a pretty interesting model where they have a tourism manager who is a 0.5 city employee and a 0.5 employee of their tourism business improvement district. So the hotels did a voluntary assessment that pays into this T-bid. She works half-time for them and half-time for the city, resides in city offices and is managed there. And her focus has allowed this growth that you see here over the last few fiscal years. Another thing I just wanted to point out that this is something you might see in your future because I know there is the potential of some hotels in the pipeline for Oregon City. And you can see that their average daily rate, that's ADR, and their revenue per available room, per available hotel room, has gone up steadily in both cases, not extremely, but it's gone up at a nice rate, while their occupancy has gone down. So occupancy is done as a percentage, and so it's gone down about 2 percentage points. But that's probably because of an addition of capacity. So they've added hotel rooms, they're able to charge more for rooms, they're getting more revenue per room, but the total occupancy as a percentage has gone down a little bit. It could be something you would see here as well. Finally, Seaside, Oregon. They're considerably smaller. They're only about 7,000 people. They, of course, are a major tourism town. About 2/3 of their jobs one-third of their jobs depend on tourism. They've had a city-staffed tourism position for just over 10 years. I talked to John Rawl, who's the assistant city manager. He used to be in that position, and he was our client when he was in that role. A couple of things he shared that he thought might be salient for you. It's a community that really believes in tourism and a city council that supports the industry. So he felt that those two things together really gave the industry a lot of latitude to do what it needed to do. They rebranded after they had 3 years of continued growth. Each quarter was a growth over the previous. And at a certain point, they decided not to rest on their laurels and to rebrand. And that included an amplification toolkit for local merchants and partners and the development of brand ambassadors. So the takeaway really from John was you got to involve the community. I feel strongly that's what we did in the development of this plan. And you can see in the plan, there's a list of people who participated in the visioning session, the folks who participated on the planning team, including Commissioner Ide. But that needs to continue too. That community engagement needs to continue for this to be a strong part of your economy. Which brings me to this, the recommendations in the report for your org structure and funding. This is from the economic impact study that was included as part of the work. These are the projections for what your transient room tax might look like, particularly if you add 1 additional or 2 additional hotels. So currently, it's structured like this. 25% goes to economic development coordinator position and 10% to city overhead, and then the balance is used for grants and reserves. And what the recommendation of the planning team was that 25% go to the economic development coordinator position, 10% to city overhead, and then an additional FTE would be needed to implement the tourism strategic plan. Approximately $50,000 then in operational funds for grants and programs. The tourism department, or whatever it might be named, would be housed within economic development. And you would need to establish a tourism advisory board or commission that would be something like the model of the Economic Development Advisory Board to maintain that stakeholder engagement that I just referenced. So it's our feeling that the combination, and I shouldn't say just ours, it's the feeling of the team that put this together, that the combination of that engagement with the board and the dedication of that particular staff member to focusing on developing that part of the economy is the winning combination. I bring all this up because I understand that some of the commissioners had some concerns about how this might play out. So this is certainly, I think, part of the conversation that we can have here tonight. And with that, I want to leave the balance of the time for Q&A.
Can you go back to the last slide, please?
Absolutely.
So the 10% of city overhead, is that overhead related to extra police and extra public works services that support events and tourism industry related activities, or is it just overhead?
Mr. Parno?
Thank you, Mayor Holliday and Commissioner Mengelberg. That should be stated as administration of the program. So that's everybody that gets involved and takes an accountant to figure out what the dollar amount is going to be, run that over, and hire the staff and do all that kind of stuff. So
Any
it's not a lot of money.
Okay, all right. The second thing is on the $50,000 for operational funds for grants and programs. Is part of that $50,000 dedicated to advertising, marketing, public relations?
I would defer to Eric on that, but I think it probably would be some of
That would be part of the programs, yes.
And I think those would be proposals to this advisory board who would then make the decision on how to distribute those funds. And what you would want to do, in my opinion, is set up some really clear decision criteria and ranking criteria so that the temptation always is, oh, well, my brother-in-law really wants to do this event, can we give him $5,000? But you need to spend that money in a way that's going to bring the best ROI. And so you need a really consistent method for making that determination. I would recommend putting something like that in place.
Yeah, so the advisory board would put together essentially with the coordinator a work plan, and they would decide, they would advise on the types of programs that they would like to implement. And I'm sure coming right out of the gate, marketing would be a big one that would be included. So,
Great, thank you.
And where is this advisory board going to come from?
well, that's one of it's one of the tasks for the coordinator. So we have the folks that have been working with us on the planning teams. Some of them may be incorporated into this advisory board who have an interest. We would work out an approach to solicit for members of the advisory board. It would come through the commission, certainly, on how to do that and how to structure that. But that would be one of the coordinator's tasks, is to structure that.
Well, under the city charter, the mayor has appointment capability for all boards and commissions.
It would be suggested by the advisory board and come through the city commission. And the mayor can make the decision.
Okay. Commissioner Wright, you got anything?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for the presentation and the plan that you put together. Really appreciated it. I always try to look down the road, maybe 10 or 20 years. If somebody came back and wanted to look at this plan, the way it was presented previously, all the information was there, but this is much more readable and understandable, and I just appreciated the extra effort there.
Thank you. I'm
Thanks
very
for
glad to hear that.
And I think the advisory committee is really essential. I think that we need to keep really in tune with what the people are wanting concerning the tourism and the direction that they want the commission to take this whole division. And I'm also curious about whether there's enough money now or in the next budget cycle, as far as being able to afford to hire a new full-time position. Is that something that's up and coming, or when could that happen if we move forward with this?
Well, I have discussed this with the finance director, and we could make it a budget adjustment now and have it implemented as soon as next meeting. We could bring it back to a future meeting this fiscal year and get it done. So I get a little eager sometimes, but
Before we do that, what's your role in this tourism development? Because if I read the report correctly, 25% of your compensation is derived from TRT, is that correct? Because it's in the report, it says that.
not mine. It would be the economic development coordinator who would make sure that the tourism coordinator is following the plan and getting it established.
So within your department?
Yes, in my department, yes.
I'll wait my turn and ask my plethora of questions.
Commissioner Shaw, you got anything for us?
Well, I think when we go down memory lane here, we had a whole bunch of tourism committees and things in this community, and the idea with this was to consolidate that, which you've done here. So I think we're going in the right direction. But Eric, did you say you have an economic advisory person and a tourism advisory person?
I have
What
an
is?
economic development
what's the-
coordinator. I have an economic development coordinator who does a lot of the administrative work. She does scheduling for business recruitment and outreach. She's overseeing this tourism effort right now. She's doing the Metro Enhancement Grant
is that
Program.
Lori?
That's Lori, yes, that's Lori.
There she is, okay. Okay. All right.
So that's kind of her responsibility.
And so there's going to be
She oversees special projects.
right, special project.
Yeah,
Yep.
primarily, and does some administrative work.
And then you're going to have a tourism,
The tourism coordinator is there to focus specifically on implementing the tourism plan. That would be their sole job,
which would work under Lori.
which would work with Lori, would report to Lori.
So, all right, well, this is, this started out with a lot of public input. And now this hasn't been rolled out to the public yet. This is just coming before us, and then it's
Right.
going to go to the public, right?
Right.
Okay. All right. Good.
Commissioner Wright, do you have anything else?
Just a comment about I'm sure that my mind always goes back to operations, so you have to bear with me. But, I always feel like that the job description would need to be very unique in that it's certainly focused on tourism, but is there enough to start with, to to hire someone full-time in this and what other responsibilities that person might have, or be able to relieve other areas in the meantime. But it's just a comment. It's not really a question.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, I've read this 56-page report 2 times. Unlike Commissioner Hyde, I had to search for information within it, but I found it. My concerns are many. The first one is it appears to be a planning document that in 2020, we will still be planning. Still planning. And my concern is if we were to accelerate some of our assets, specifically the Willamette Falls Legacy Project, do our parallel assets keep pace with that? Do we have them developed so that when we offer this total package, are we prepared to offer a total package? So when I read this report, I could probably do this whole meeting and just ask you question after question. I don't know if that's fair to everybody. So currently, if one were being unkind, they would say this report is a lot of sizzle and no steak. Where's the meat of the report? Where's the part that says, who's the project manager of this, Eric? Who manages this?
The project manager is Lori, so she's filling in. She took over after Leanne left.
Okay, so who is coordinating, and I'll give the report credit, and I don't know if it was from a prior report or what, who coordinates the ownership and the listing of assets that we're going to include in this tourism offer? Who interacts with those people and establishes a timeline of what their contribution is going to be, what they need to do, who's going to do it, when it's going to be due, and how we're going to accomplish it? Who has done that to date? Have we taken any steps whatsoever? Anybody?
Not from there. You can speak, come to the microphone.
We haven't taken any steps on that because we don't have a plan. We're waiting for a plan to be approved and be ready to be implemented.
So are we still going to be planning in 2020? Because when I read the bar chart, that's what it tells me. That's what this report tells me. We're still in the planning phase in 2020. Yeah, I read it.
Is this the bar chart you're referring to? So this is an operational planning bar chart. So this is the plan for how the implementation of the plan phases out.
Right.
So yes, some of these things you can't do everything at once, and some of these things are intended to be done a few years down the road.
So we already had an inventory of assets before, correct? I mean, that was provided in a prior report by, I think maybe even another company.
Yes, yes.
So we know the assets. Do we know who manages those assets and who controls them?
That would be the responsibility of the coordinator to come in and do that and take that inventory and get those players together.
So you're telling me nothing happens until we put this coordinator position in place?
Well, that's what we want to talk about tonight. So that's the kind of feedback we're looking for. That's what we're proposing currently. It's going to take some effort. And our thinking is that, in order to do that effectively, there needs to be specific focus on the tourism effort. Right now, the department doesn't have the capacity to specifically focus.
So neither you nor any of your people can handle any component of this?
We can do it partially. But our thinking was it's smarter to wait until we have the resources to effectively pursue it and implement it.
Well, when I look at it, I look at some of the basic statements, and they're as basic as they can get. How do we increase the spend? Will we increase the number of people, the length of their stay, and their spend because they're going to be here? What are we relying upon? We're relying upon additional hotels. I just don't see anyone who has brought together all the components of this, who is meeting or has met, even on a preliminary basis, with the people who control those assets, whether it be the Downtown Business Association or restaurant owners, hotel owner, tourism people, the existing historical societies. I don't see anything. I see a plan to do that. But again, my concern is initially, if we accelerate our main attraction, we're going to be playing catch up on this plan. And there's parts of the plan that I think are pretty elementary. I mean, the target market just goes from closest geographic position to furthest. I never see anything in the way of a website that says how we're going to get hits and draw attractions from far. I see the target market as Portland and then the Pacific Northwest and then, Willamette Valley. There's some redeeming features in the report in the form of opportunities and barriers, and the barriers are there. But the thing that troubles me the most is there's no coordination of assets. And in my mind, as one who has managed multi-million-dollar projects, to me, my goal would be to take some concrete steps immediately to establish and accelerate our current asset development, how we're going to use it, to identify and meet with those who control those assets and get that ball rolling, even if it's preliminary, to establish a timeline with milestones. Does anybody have project management experience within ours? Do you?
Yes, so
And milestones and Gantt charts and?
Yes, I do. I've done that,
good,
yes.
good.
So can I just make a real quick comment
Yeah,
on
please do.
that point there?
Yeah.
We are doing something right now. We have identified an asset and the promotion and the things that we can do right now with the resources that we have now, so we're actively pursuing that. This position that's being recommended in this plan involves more comprehensive promotion and tourism plan implementation. We're hitting the ground running. We're taking care of what we can do now with the resources we have now. And we have the consultant here tonight who's helping us with that as part of this larger plan to give you an update on some of those things that we're doing. If you would like for me to bring him up and he can give you a quick.
Well, in the end, he's still a consultant and you're the manager, and that's why I'm talking to you.
But we're doing it. And so he'll let you know when things are going to start coming out. And it's going to be pretty soon. So you'll be seeing things. And we're doing everything we can right now with the resources that we have now. And if you want, I can bring him up.
No, I don't want to be in a position in 2 years from now when key assets are online, when our premier piece, I hopefully is starting to generate in attendance.
Right.
That the subsidiary, the other attractions aren't ready. I mean, we cannot have people here and generate the income we want unless all these pieces are in place. So we have pieces that we could be working on already, whether it's commitment by the restaurateurs or the historical societies or whomever. And I take it that no one meets with them currently. And you're saying because of lack of manpower.
Yes, there's a lack of resources, but we are working on some of these items.
Well, again, I look at it as a project manager. I see things, we do this, we establish a timeline, we establish milestones, we do monthly reviews and make sure everybody's on track. We take care of the individual components, whether they be the historical aspects, the lodging, the retail, they're on parallel paths, they're moving, and then we integrate them into a final solution. And I'm concerned that what I hear is a plan and a plan and a plan, but I don't see step one in concrete action, and the clock's running. So I just don't want to be planning in 2020. I think, geez, you know what? The Allies invaded Europe in D-Day and planned that in 2 years and executed it. Mm-hmm. Or else we'd be speaking German. Can we not do anything faster than that? So I think there's some basics that are here that are worthwhile. And I know it sounds critical, and it is critical. This plan is dependent on TRT funding, additional hotels, cultivating those. The resources, at least, are properly listed. I don't see an associated name who controls those organizations. I don't hear anything about meetings with those people to start formulating a plan on how they will participate in this future success. And what bothers me, I look at those graphs, and some of them say currently Oregon City gets 6% of the total spend in Clackamas County, 6. I don't want to have a parochial view that our target market is the city of Portland. Put it out there so anybody can discover it. So that's my concern. Timely preparation of this, get beyond the planning phase. You've heard the phrase, if you're a professional, plan, do, check, act.
Exactly.
I don't want to be in the planning phase in 2 years. There's somewhere that goes from plan to do, and then we check that result and maybe we redo it. But at least we do something. We don't have to seek perfection. We have to seek progress. And that's That's what I don't see. I see a plan. I don't see concrete steps to move it forward. And with that, I'll end my discussion.
Commissioner Wright?
I appreciate everything that you've said. It's been my observation over the many years that there's been a lot of tourism groups in the city that have been actively working in their specific areas, such as, Rocky's here with his ghost tours and the EOT and all the different assets that we've identified. And I'm sure there's some there that we haven't even identified, but yet. But they've been working and waiting for the city to lead and to develop a plan so that when the larger things happen, such as the legacy project and more people start coming into the city, that there can be something already in place. And if we're going to do it right, I think we need to take our time and do it right. And it's not going to happen in a 6-month period of time. I also, as a former staff person, I understand about capacity and, Eric's already got an overwhelming job description, and with Lori's position, that's brings some relief for that. But somebody needs to be focused on tourism, and if we're going to move forward on any of these objectives here, then we need somebody who is focused on that. And I don't know if this is the time to, but it's just my preference to hire someone sooner rather than later. But there are already people in the community who are just waiting for us to act. And it's going to be that person, that new staff person's job to begin to put these plans together. And if you look on the slide that our speaker brought forward, there's certain things that are happening in 18, 19, and 20, and it's showing that the things happening in 18 will have been accomplished, and by the time we're in 20, a lot of that is going to already be in place, and we can launch a more a full plan. So I hear what you're saying, and I too, it would be it would be very important to have. To see the flow chart and then to have regular updates from staff as far as providing some accountability from us to you that, or from you to us, so that we're able to see that things are being accomplished.
Certainly, and that's the intent. It's, the coordinator position would essentially be the project manager to develop those specific plans and to get those groups together and to get the assets together to work consistently. And we would be reporting on a regular basis, a routine basis of the progress of that. So that's the first shot out of the gate. You got to walk before you can run. And so we have to build that before we're actually ready for the tourist.
And I guess my argument would be, it doesn't sound like we're even crawling yet. That we're not engaging these people that have these ownership of these assets to get them thinking about what are we going to do. I don't mind increasing payroll, but I want to see value for it. I want the citizens of Oregon City to know that there's value. Not that anybody does less, that everybody's doing as much as they can. So you sit here and you tell us we need another body. And I sit here and I look at it and I say, well, there's a plan. But step one, the first engagement to gather those assets and start planting the seed. And what are we going to do? We talked to Jonathan about downtown. We talked to Rocky and his folks and the other historical associations about what's your participation going to be. Start thinking about it. We maybe just get that seed going. And again, it's all about, in business it's called time to market. Right. We have to have our product ready to put on the market, a complete product. And the better it is on initial introduction, and I don't expect it to be perfect. I said it before. Progress, not perfection. I want to make some progress, that we have something marketable, even if it's only a 20% offering, and then we'll build upon that.
Understood. But Commissioner O'Donnell, I would like to mention that I believe in my mind that the seed has been planted, because we've had a lot of those groups from those assets involved in our planning for this plan. Mm-hmm. They've been at the table. And so the seed's been planted. They know what's going on and they're ready for it to come. So it's out there, and they're waiting. They're waiting for us to officially approve the plan so they can get started.
Commissioner Megawork?
Nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I think this framework provides the direction that I'm comfortable with. And I'm like Nancy, I want to get going. I want to allocate resources, and I want to start promoting and refining and continuing to get better and better along the way, but let's just start. So I'd be very interested to hear from the gentleman you mentioned about what's been happening around branding.
Okay.
Commissioner Shaw, you got anything else?
Well, I guess my concern, and I think it kind of goes along with Commissioner O'Donnell here about the overhead on this, and I think Mayor Holliday's brought this up a few times too about adding folks. And I guess I'd rather, if there's an opportunity to see if we can just do this at 0.5, like one of the cities you mentioned, kind of a part-time, we kind of ease into this, because we have to kind of watch our overhead a little bit here. And I know Mr. Parno would like to be able to adjust as we go along. So adding a full-time person is, and maybe I'm wrong, Mr. Parno, but is that rough, or would, is that as far as our budget's going to be happening here in the future, or what?
Thank you, Mayor Holliday. Commissioner Shaw, I think I would concisely say, just a reminder that the TRT revenue, the transient room tax revenue, is required under state law to be dedicated towards tourism programs.
Okay.
So what's being presented is the best use of those funds according to the consultants at this time, knowing that they're somewhat limited with the one hotel that we have and a couple of things with the RV park. So my understanding is that what they're presenting is, and what they could afford with the current TRT revenue is a full-time position, and then the $50,000 for operations for that person to work. What might be best is just to understand what that position would come in and do. Because my understanding is that the Coraggio group was hired, they pulled all the stakeholders together. They had several meetings, and Commissioner Wright could talk about that better than I just kind of popped in on a couple and observed, and I thought it was a pretty good energy coming out of those meetings. So they've all been contacted, they worked together to come up with the plan. And I think what's being requested tonight is just to have a person focused on implementing the plan, which means continuing those regular discussions when the consultant is no longer here to help with those, putting together marketing materials, putting together a website, all these things that that position would do. The commission could decide that could be a half-time position or a full-time position. I think either of those options would be affordable using the TRT revenue that's dedicated to that purpose.
And could it not be a contractual position?
Could as well, yeah.
Okay.
If I could, just one point of clarification, the 0.5 I referenced was 0.5 funded by city, the other 0.5 funded voluntarily by hotel. So she has a full FTE focused on tourism for San Luis Obispo.
Yeah.
And I do want to mention also in Atascadero, and I don't know, and forgive me, I maybe should know, but I don't know if this is an issue in Oregon City. Through having that role, they've been able to increase the compliance of the vacation rentals in paying their TOT, which has brought additional revenue in, which has helped pay some of her salary. So I don't know if there's a gap between what you'd like to be collecting and what you are collecting, but having somebody focused on the tourism sector who's bringing those people into the fold and convincing them the value of that might be able to raise those collections as well.
Well, let me ask Mr. Underwood a question. If you had that person at your disposal, this person we're talking about hiring, you had him at your disposal tomorrow morning, what would you have him do?
The first thing that they would do is develop a specific action plan, a work plan for that. They would go out and reach out to these tourism assets and bring them together and work on forming some sort of advisory board. So those would be the first tasks.
And currently, we don't have enough time within the department to
We
even
do
start
not.
that task.
We do not. We're doing what we can currently with the elevator, the experiential marketing campaigns, what we're doing currently. And that's who our consultant is here representing tonight.
You want to bring?
Let's hear from your consultant.
Okay, Lance, would you like to come up? You can stay there.
Thanks for letting me talk with you today. Appreciate it. My name is Lance Kagi. I'm with Rotator Creative. We're an agency out of Tacoma, Washington, and we were brought on through Eric and some funding through DOCA that came from Travel Oregon partly, and then from the city as well. And our task was to look at the opportunity to create an experience that would draw people into Oregon City to linger longer, spend money on food, shopping, and other, amenities here, visiting museums and whatnot. We had a great kickoff a couple months back where we met with a number of stakeholders from the city, from various historical groups, merchants as well, from both downtown and midtown, and then of course city stakeholders. And Matthew added a lot to our discussion as well. And from that, we developed a concept for leveraging low-hanging fruit for something actionable right away, with the focal point of the elevator as a draw for people to come and begin a half day to a day experience in the city. We really found that the elevator became kind of the central point for starting an experience. So it acts as kind of a hub and allows people to choose their own path to go forward. And a way we are engaging those people is through a field guide. So they pick up a field guide at the elevator, really depending on the elevator operators as kind of a concierge or a tourist guide in a sense, to kind of start people off with a good experience in the city. And then they can go around to this various points along the city, doing some activities that are brought out in the field guide, and collecting from participating merchants and other activities, stamps in their field guide. And if they've done a number of tasks, then they can get a prize at the end, which is a pennant of Oregon City that's kind of like a keepsake that they can, take home as a souvenir, basically, for their time here in the city. The demographic we are really shooting for is the larger metro area around Oregon City, upping all the way to Vancouver, Astoria. Of course, Portland is probably the largest draw, and the age demographic we're going for is that kind of millennial or young families, 25 to 34 years old, approximately. And so in conjunction with the actual experience elements, there will be a promotional plan that includes rack cards for tourism promotion, a social media plan where we're reaching out to the key touch points for that demographic, drawing in some influencers in the social media market, and then reaching them through these various touch points that way. You'll begin to see some implementation of that in the next few weeks, starting with some permanent upgrades to the elevator so that the elevator experience becomes more exciting and allows those visitors to come to feel like, oh, there's something interesting happening here. So.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, I'm pleased with the work at the elevator, and I believe it's a focal point, and the type of thing you're talking about, I've seen it be successful in other areas, so that's a good start. Again, I want to see value for the money we spend. I want to see a return on our investment. I want to see initial progress beyond the planning phase. If I were to summarize what I had to say, and my greatest concern is time to market with as much product as we can deliver. And I looked at your report, and I looked at what your target market is and what they want, and it's pretty evenly dispersed between those that want a very specific experience and those that want a general number of experiences. So, the framework is there. It's time to execute. And this gentleman, Mr. Underwood, tells me he doesn't have the resources to do it.
We could manage a portion of it, a small portion, but we don't have the resources to implement it the way that would be effective. And I'm sure that the commission is wanting it, if we're going to spend this much time and resources into putting this plan together and wanting to do it right, we would want to do it in a way that it's going to be effective. And with our limited resources that we have, with all the other things that we're involved with, we wouldn't be able to focus on that.
Well, I want to do it right too, Eric.
Yeah, I know.
What I don't want.
I know you
don't
do.
want managers managing managers, and those managers managing subordinates, and those subordinates managing contractors or people I want somebody. I don't need a lot of chiefs. I need some Indians getting the work done.
Yeah, we don't want that either. And
Okay.
I just
Same
want
page.
I just want it to be done right, and I want to have that focus on it because I think that's the way it's going to get done right.
It's under your purview.
Okay, we're going to take 3 more minutes and then we're going to move on.
Just really quickly, a case in point about that, Commissioner O'Donnell, is that we had to hire someone to operate the Ermitinger House when it opened recently. There wasn't anyone on staff able to do that just as far as capacity. So, just another case in point that, we do need some additional help to implement this plan.
But that was a function of poor planning as well, over 2 years or 3 years. That's a fact.
Okay.
Commissioner Shaw? Okay, so I only have a couple of comments. I think the advisory board needs to be established by ordinance in conjunction with the city commission and follow the charter like every other advisory board and commission in the city. I also have a very healthy, distrust is not the right word, but level of skepticism about plans, because I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've seen hundreds and hundreds of $1,000s spent on the downtown waterfront master plan, this master plan, that master plan, that if you go back and pull it off the shelf today, those areas don't look anything like what we spent all this money to quote plan for. So I'm much like Commissioner O'Donnell in the fact that I want to see something actually start to work, not continue to plan. So with that said, you guys can go back and do some more of your talking or whatever and bring us something. I assume something's coming to us at the commission level shortly.
Do we have an agenda date yet?
The 5th.
The 5th, next meeting.
Okay, then we can discuss the specifics at that point. Thanks, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So now we move on to 18376, Oregon City Management Salary Study and Proposed Compensation Adjustments. Mr. Conkle.
Thank you. Give me 1 second. Thank you, Mayor, evening Commissioners. So I'm here to present tonight the Oregon City Management Salary Study and Proposed Compensation Adjustments. So why am I bringing this forward? For several years, we've had discussions and concerns raised by some of our managers as it relates to the compensation study that's currently in place within this city. And so tonight, when I talk about this, kind of 3 terms I'm going to use. Management, that's made up of the directors and the managers. Then we have the directors and we have the managers, kind of 3 separate groups within the management organization that we have here. I think it's important to acknowledge, and I'll go through this with the PowerPoint here tonight, some of the concerns that have been raised over the years as it relates to the last time that a compensation study was back in 2004, the lack of any change in the salary benefits that are provided to the managers, other than the cost of living adjustments that happen at the discretion of the commission. And so we were finally able to move forward. And what we were seeing is we were getting several requests coming in individually, looking at the benefits and the salary structures that are being provided throughout the region, and trying to address those in a one-on-one fashion. So it was really time to just sit down and look at this holistically as an organization, really try to look at how we're doing this and is it the best way to do it. And so So the objectives of the study were to update the 2004 management compensation study. As I said earlier, this had not been done for the management group, managers in particular, since that 2004 study was implemented. And at that time, the city changed from a 9-step system, similar to what you'd see in the unions with steps every year. Once you hit the top, that's the top of the salary range, to a midpoint, max salary study with a merit program. They also, throughout the years, the management group lost things such as the ability to buy back vacation time, longevity pay, and I'll talk about one of the other policies that was a big concern for multiple managers throughout the years as I go through this here. So compare the existing salary ranges to the region to remain competitive. Compare internal equity of positions and responsibilities. So since it had been so long, you started to see some separation of positions that when you look at them holistically are very, very similar. And so you were starting to see some shifts in compensation when really the responsibilities of that position are very, very similar. So that was creating some concerns within the manager group. And then address the city's existing policy of limiting salaries to the midpoint. This was one that was brought up quite often. So I'll go through this a little bit, and there's another slide that I have that'll demonstrate this a little bit better as well. But when we went to this minimum, midpoint, max, we saw this very, very large salary potential within there. But we had an internal policy of no one can go above the midpoint, plus or minus a couple percent. So a couple of things that had happened historically was you would apply for a job and you saw this large salary range, either during the interview process or in some instances after you were hired in, realize that we have a policy that says you can never get to this top end of this salary range. So one of the requests was, is there a better way to do this and be more transparent about what the actual salary range is? So we hired a firm called MBL Group. They worked with the directors, the managers, and getting an understanding of the existing job descriptions, make sure job descriptions were accurate for the service, for the responsibilities and the work that they were performing for the city. They reviewed with city staff what those job descriptions were. And then we had a couple of kind of unique positions that aren't what you would typically see, whether it be, the aquatics supervisor. Some of the roles aren't as clear as some of the other ones, such as a street supervisor. Pretty consistent throughout the region. So we worked to make sure that we had those job descriptions well understood and that we were able to make good comparisons. So part of the methodology was comparing with similar cities. Here you see the 9 cities that we utilized throughout the region. And what we did is we compared Oregon City's capped midpoint to the regional maximum salaries. So all these other jurisdictions have what you would consider a typical salary range where you come in through performance. You get to the maximum after a certain amount of time, and then you're at the top of the range. So because we had a policy that says, regardless of what our range is, the midpoint is the policy for the top of the range, that's what we use to compare to the other jurisdictions when we're looking at a salary to salary comparison. What we found was that Oregon City's average midpoint salary is slightly below comparable cities' average maximum salary. Most cities do not have a merit program, and more than half of the cities offer deferred compensation through their system. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this, and just this is not to scale, but so when I talk about this, this is looking at averages compared. So I'm going to start with this is what I would consider our salary range. You have a minimum, a midpoint, which is our policy, and a maximum. The Oregon City midpoint, and in doing this, we looked at about 27 positions. So the Oregon City midpoint, which is what our policy puts us at, is about 3.4% below the average maximum in the region. So if we took those 9, and in some instances, we had a lot of comps. And in other instances, we had a few. So that's where we not only took the comps that we had of the other jurisdictions, but then also looked at internal equity. Are these similar enough that these should be grouped together? And what we also found was that 18 of the 27 positions, or 66% of them, the midpoint was below the average maximum in the region. So 2/3 of our midpoint policy was lower than the average maximum in the region for that comparable position. The second thing that we see then is in red is trying to show where the Oregon City midpoint relates. So it's 3.4% lower than the or comparable city's average maximum. So what we did is we looked at those, looked at internal equity, rearranged some of the job descriptions so that they were consistent with similar duties, and then tried to place it so that we were, and we ended up being, on average, about 3.1% higher than the average maximum in the region. So felt that we had the average max and that we wanted to be just above that to remain competitive in the region. By redoing the salary structure, and then part of this is also reducing that max that nobody could get to and make it attainable. And then where that new max would be, like I said, approximately 3.1% above the average maximum in the region. By doing this, we bring 22 of our 27 positions in line with the region. 5 of them would still be below the average max in the region. And the other part that we discovered is that this max that was put into place back in 2004 was about 2.8% higher than the average maximum in the region. So it does make sense to really back that down, be more consistent with what we see in the region, and then make it attainable in our job descriptions and for our employees to get to. Here's some of the merit and deferred compensation that we see throughout the region. So you see a range on deferred compensation from 0 to 4.5%. You do see a merit system, 3.5 and 5, and then add pay. So for whatever additional pay options that they have in one of those jurisdictions. So we sat down, created a working group of managers from across the city, from across departments, and really tried to get an understanding of what their concerns were, what their priorities were, and then looked at the results that we had here. And so when sitting down with them, it was to try to address their concerns that they had identified, such as the policy relating to the midpoint. Just 17 of our 35 managers are OPSERP, so they're not tier 1, they're not tier 2. Retirement benefits, deferred compensation is becoming more and more important for new hires as they're coming in, as the older pension system is becoming obsolete. So that was one thing that they identified as one of their priorities. In balancing that was, what can we do being fiscally responsible over the long term for the city? And so in discussions with the directors, there was an agreement to reduce the merit pay option across the board. So instead of having the 5% merit option, we would reduce that to 3%. So what came out of this was reducing the existing maximum salaries to be consistent with the average maximum salaries in the region, rescind the midpoint salary policy, reduce merit pay from 5% to 3% for department directors and managers, and then implement a 3% deferred comp program for the managers. So trying to offset some of that cost through the reduction in the merit program. Realign the positions for internal equity of responsibilities, update the plan every 5 years, and update policies for consistent implementation across all departments. We had seen some departments implementing merit pay differently than other departments were, so trying to make sure that we're consistent throughout the city when we do this. So in working with the managers as well as the finance department, there were other things that were proposed that we decided weren't appropriate to bring forward, such as installation of longevity pay, buyback of vacation days, a personal day. So those were all things that were discussed with the managers through the working group. But we felt like we're bringing forward a proposal that meets the needs of the managers. as well as something that is affordable to the city. When we look at this, we took a worst case scenario and we're looking at $200,000 to $250,000 over 5 years. That assumes continued 2% COLAs. That includes everyone maxes out on the merit or that merit is funded. That improves steps or maximum steps for every employee every year. So that would be everything went well and funded exactly the way it is today. So those are some of the impacts that we see. In working with and talking with the employees, both the managers and the directors, as well as the attorney, how do we have this conversation with the commission was something that we debated quite a bit. These are existing programs that already exist. Deferred comp already exists if we decide to set that up for the managers. Reducing the salary scale is certainly within the direction of the city manager to be able to accomplish that. So really what I was hoping today was to provide you what I recommend that we do as a city based on the negotiations with the managers, consultation with the finance director and the department heads to make some changes. 14 years is a long time to go without looking at compensation and trying to remain competitive in the region. We've lost 2 managers in the last 6 weeks, one to a private side, one to another public institution. We have constant pressure for managers, experienced managers, which is what we have here in this city. Police department receives quite a bit of pressure. Engineering department receives quite a bit of pressure. And I think the other part of this is, I think it's really a good thing, is that we have managers who've been here a long time. Implementing this salary study with the new top, let's just say that they got 2% steps every year. 11 of the 35 would be at the maximum within 2 years. So we have good long-term managers who've been here a long time, who've been frozen at a midpoint, receiving merit pay, certainly, when they earn it. But addressing some of these perceived and existing inequities, I think would be well received and much overdue to implement. So I will stop there and be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Conkle, can you go back a slide? I want to see what other cities do in the way of merit pay. Almost non-existent. Well, let me ask a question, because we're in the business of watching the purse strings, and we also want to attract the best talent. We want to retain the best talent. Have we been able to attract worthy candidates under our current pay structure? And the second question is, have we suffered a mass exodus because of our pay structure?
I think that we've been able to attract some good folks.
Yes.
I think that I have had multiple folks come to me and say, if I knew that the salary study you advertised wasn't attainable, I would have thought twice about making this move. I think that the midpoint policy is seen as inequitable and not very transparent as to what our compensation plan is.
I agree with that, Tony. I've been in other companies that did that.
Yeah.
At some point, if I have achieved all I can achieve in that job, I should be at 100%.
Right.
So I don't have any argument with that.
Mm-hmm.
The question that still remains, though, have we been able to attract talent? And I'm fine with restating our compensation policy and making it plain so it's not misleading.
Mm-hmm.
Have we been able to attract talent, and have we suffered a mass exodus of talent because of our policy?
I don't think we've seen a mass exodus, but we are starting to see some attrition, and we are starting to not at the management level. We've lost a couple. At the union level, we're starting to see it quite a bit, especially if you've got experience in building, engineering, police. We really do start to see that pressure, but we lost, assistant city recorder. So trying to not be in a position where we're reactionary. I'd rather work with the managers now so that there's less desire to jump.
And I also want to make sure that when we have lost people, I don't want to miscategorize it as because of lack of compensation. You know, if somebody wanted to take on another challenge in the
Right.
private sector, that's not related to compensation. The other question about this whole presentation is salary is just one piece of the compensation. How do the other components of the compensation and benefit package compare to these other cities? Are they all equitable?
We focused on the salary component. You know, and I don't have an exact answer for you, but you typically start to see similar benefits as it relates to health benefits that are out there. We're all kind of in similar pools as it relates to that, whether it's through MODA, Kaiser, Blue Cross, Providence. I mean, when we go out for renewals, you know, they're very comparable. You know, I think that, you know, plus or minus a couple percent, you know, when we look at that.
Do employees participate in paying the cost of premiums?
For healthcare?
Yes.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Can I weigh in on this? I think your question is a really good one. And I kind of want to, I feel like I should help out a little bit because I've been bugging, I've been one of the people bugging Tony about this. And I'll just say from the outset, this proposed plan cost me, I lose 2% a year, and I don't care. So it's not, this plan is not something that everybody's going to benefit from. And I think some other directors are going to lose money with this, and that's fine. What happens, there's a couple interesting things I think with employees, and one, union employees every 3 years get to go have a voice. We sit down at a table, negotiate a contract, and we start with a whole big list of I'd sure like this, and then we whittle it down and we get to something that everybody can live with. The managers, I think there was a lot of miscommunication. There was a lack of understanding about there's this huge range, but there's a glass ceiling that I can't reach, and it just irritated people. There was confusion. They didn't understand it. One of the things that I gotta say, and I gotta say this on behalf of my captains, and I think that other department heads would say the same thing about their managers. There is retention and there is attracting talent, but there is also a piece that is tied to this that has to do with morale. And it isn't, I beat my two guys over the head all the time, and I'm driving them. And they do not want to be paid more than anybody else. I think that I can make an argument that I drive them harder than anybody else. Their message to me, and the consistent one is not, if you're going to drive me harder than these guys, I should at least make the same money they do. And so it's not, it is tied to overall, I think, that the third component of what you're bringing up is also tied to people who've been here for a long time, people who are getting driven hard, wanting to know that they're making what the guy in Canby makes. They're making what the people in Milwaukee are making. They're making what people who are doing the exact same thing who might not be driven as hard. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Because that is another piece to it that I think is really important.
Anybody else?
I have a question about the deferred comp. Is that the city contributing 3% on the employee's behalf?
Correct.
And that's pre-tax dollars, so is there a financial benefit to that, to the city? Or
Thank
to
you,
the
Mayor Holliday
employee?
and Commissioner Mengelberg. Yeah, I just want to comment too, there's two aspects to the proposal here that have a cost impact. One is that currently, as Tony presented, you've got department heads and managers that are paid slightly below comparable positions in the region. So bringing them up to the comparable will cost the city money. $250,000 is the maximum we anticipated. If everybody stays and goes up, that's why he says 5 years. In 5 years, we'd reach that point. If there's turnover, which we've had kind of recently, where a couple of department directors came in a lower position, that doesn't come into play. When you spread that across all the funds, it's actually affordable in the budget, because I thought Commissioner Ida probably asked me that. The second cost component to this is the deferred comp plan, and as Chief Band just mentioned, the department heads elected to reduce their salaries by 2% to contribute to the deferred comp program. In addition to that, as you just mentioned, Commissioner Mengelberg, we wouldn't have to pay FICA taxes on that. So the net effect of the deferred compensation plan is a benefit to the city of $13,000. So when you take in the department directors reducing their pay a little bit, and you take not having to pay FICA.
Well, let's be clear about the department directors. They're not reducing their salary, they're reducing from 5% to 3% the maximum merit pay they can receive. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, and I consider that absolutely the same thing, because I'm looking at Tony, and I'm saying the maximum merit I can get with all the things that we've accomplished in my department is now 3, not 5. So I'm willing to make that concession, because the other thing I think that Tony tried to say so eloquently and thoughtfully is, I've got staff, and I'm fully aware of some of these managers that we're not feeling good about a lot of this stuff when they compare themselves to other folks in the region. So there is a morale issue there. And Tony did an excellent job of pulling folks together and talking about it. But I did want to make the point that the two cost aspects, because I'm the finance guy, one is pretty affordable when you're talking about moving people within the region. The other one, the deferred comp plan, because of what you said, not having to pay the FICA. And if you then aren't expected to come up with that 5% merit, as you said, Mayor, I ran those numbers and it actually nets the city $13,000 a year.
Any other questions?
So, back to the first slide there, Tony, or where it showed the min-max, right there,
Yep.
that one there.
Yep.
Is this gonna disappear now? I mean, this little scale, I mean,
Yes.
is that's what we're kind of hoping?
We will have a true minimum,
Okay.
maximum, and if you perform, if you've been here, you got your years of experience, and you've performed, and you're a leader, you will get to a max at some day, and then you'll be topped out.
Well, that begs the question, do you achieve the max just by virtue of longevity, or do you achieve it by virtue of performance reviews?
It'll be a combination. So part of the policy writing that we will do is what'll be the maximum step in a salary per year. Right now, I'm thinking 2%, and part of that will be performance-based.
So you can get some number less than 2% for a substandard performance.
Potentially, I'm working with HR because they'd rather, I'd rather have 1%, a 2% rather than 1.5 or 0.5. I mean, there's just some nuts and bolts we have to work out. But really thinking about, there's two components, right? There's a performance and then the longevity part that we have to deal with when we're looking at this compensation package the way it is. Somehow people need to be able to make steps. But then there's also a performance component of that, so that's something that we would work on with HR.
Would it simplify things to reduce the merit pay and fold it into the compensation piece directly? Because the question that follows that then is, if you achieve the maximum, then could you potentially get the merit pay on top of the maximum?
Yes. I think that's why it was attractive, was that it offered an opportunity. If you've been here for 10 years and you've been maxed out, there was the original thought of going to the merit system was that performance-based pay. And so does that continue as a carrot when you're here? You don't have longevity. You kind of just be maxed. And that's another flaw. Well, you're at the top, right? Mm-hmm. But the thought was, by still incentivizing performance, we would see that as a benefit.
Any other questions?
No.
So if I could continue here, I mean, we get to hear from the directors here, every couple weeks, every week or so. And always impressive, love you guys, but we don't get to see the managers. We get to see their work. You need to go to the Pioneer Center, you need to go over to the pool, and just see how impressive this is. And, these guys kind of make you guys look good. And so I'm impressed that these managers have stuck around here. And, there must be something here that holds them here, and so I appreciate them very much. And I'm happy to see that this has come forward here.
Commissioner Ide?
I don't like that, the fact that the directors are having to take a hit. I think it's very admirable of you to be willing to do that, but I think that it could, perhaps at some point be the sticking point or that one thing that, might tip you over the edge to take a new position somewhere, because you remember this. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just making that statement. I don't know if we could bump up the deferred comp for whatever equal percentage that would be for however many years or whatever it would take to make that equitable.
I guess I would say several years ago, the directors were able to put in a deferred comp plan, the managers were not. So I kind of just look at if we would have done it all holistically at the time, this probably would have been the plan as well. So I'm comfortable with what we've brought forward when working with the directors.
I see.
And I think if they all work together and they came up with a plan,
I know.
I don't hear any violent opposition, so why don't you bring it back to us in a form that we can give you a...
Well, I guess that would be the question. I can move forward right now, I believe. There's no new programs being created. These are all existing programs.
Why don't we memorialize it in a resolution?
Fair enough.
Okay.
And then just one other thing real quick, I just wanted to point out we've got 35 managers. We looked at 27 positions. There are new positions that we did not look at because they're brand new and they fit within there. So there was no reason to do that. There was some redundancy. We did not look at the judge's position. We did not look at my position, but I do consider with my contract, I received the same merit opportunity that my staff does. So, this is not something that is benefiting me. I just want to be clear about that.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else from good of the order?
Yes, two things real quick, sorry. So the Water Environmental Services Elected Officials Forum meets regularly. At one of the previous WES officials forums, there was Mayor Holliday had asked City Administrator Krupp and Geist, City Administrator Krupp, to get together the city managers from the jurisdictions within Tri-City and Clackamas County Service District 1 to have a discussion about the rate differential that exists. So you may recall when we put in the right-of-way fee in Oregon City, Tri-City at that point created the rate differential is what they call it. So essentially what they did is whatever we charge them for the right-of-way fee for using our right-of-ways, instead of charging it to the entire district, they charged it specifically to the Oregon City residents. So that's currently about $1.40 per month, the current rate differential. Since our initial right-of-way fee was put in place, you had Gladstone, Happy Valley put in right-of-way fees as well. Would have been CCSD did essentially the same thing, taking whatever was charged in that jurisdiction and charging it back to their residents. We were asked, our historic position in Oregon City has been that this is a district cost. You want to be a district and you want to run. We don't ask that we spend 55% of our funds go into Tri-City, that 55% gets spent in Oregon City. Some get spent in West Lynn because we're a district. So the city managers went back. West Lynn, Gladstone, Milwaukee, Happy Valley have come back and said they're fine maintaining the current system. I need to provide Administrator Krupp a position of the city. Our historic position has been, this should be applied to the district. I guess my question is that still how we feel, or do I need to bring this back for a larger discussion about whether we want to have that position?
I'll tell you right now, I feel the same way I've always felt, and that is that Tri-City Service District is a district. And you cannot separate the wolves from the sheep inside that district. So, everybody in that district should be paying the same amount of money. I won't bend on this one. The rate differential, I believe, is illegal. And my position would be that we stop paying it to Tri-City Service District. We maintain that in a what's the word I'm looking at? Account.
Side account.
Go ahead. The house,
I think side account is fair to say.
Side account,
Yeah.
there's another term for it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And then we let them come back and see what their position is. But this has been fundamentally unfair to Oregon City residents from day one. The right-of-way fee, we spent a lot of money defending it in court, and we were successful in there. So I'm not willing to bend on this one. I'll be willing to hear from anybody else, but.
I'm in your camp.
I'm in that camp as one that sits on that West board and listens to what they've got to say. I'm with the mayor on this.
I support the rest of the board.
I'm with it.
I think I have clear direction. Last
Okay.
thing, let's be very, very fast, is in speaking with some of the commissioners, obviously there are multiple committees that the mayor and the commissioners sit on. And so what we were trying to come up with as staff is a better way to bring back that communication to the rest of the group. So what I'm proposing is that during work sessions, we add an additional agenda item that talks about committee updates. And then the elected of representatives who goes to South Fork, the West, whatever group, does that seem reasonable and something folks are willing to do?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I have for
So the
tonight.
last thing for me is, after the last West elected officials forum, Oregon City had the position that we were not interested in having further discussions with Wes until the governance mediation was beginning. And they have continued to ignore that. They have a whole process going on that seems to be taking a lot longer than it needs to be to get this mediation thing together. So Commissioner O'Donnell and I have decided we're no longer going to attend the West Electeds Forum until we get to that spot about governance. Because we don't want Oregon City to be seen as being complicit in decisions that Wes is making, because we're there, they can say, well, you were there, so, you were part of the decision. So I'm just saying, that's what we've decided to do unless, the commission has a definite reason to tell us that we have to go.
Do you think they're going down that path
What?
of mediation?
Yeah, they've hired
just
Oregon
getting
Consensus and all that, but I
Okay.
think they're putting, I don't think they're applying any pressure to make that happen in
Okay.
any kind of a timely fashion.
Okay.
Is that it? Then we're adjourned.
Oh, dear.
We have Mike. So as usually before I start a meeting, if you've got a cell phone, please either silence it or turn it off. I will call the regular meeting of the Oregon City Commission order for Wednesday, August 15th, 2018. Call a roll, please.
Commissioner Shaw,
Here.
Commissioner Ide,
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Here.
and Commissioner Mengelberg is here. She's probably just right in the back here coming in, but Mayor
I thought she
Holliday.
said she was maybe not going to be here for the.
Oh, that's right. She's not going to be here. Sorry, absent.
Yeah.
Right. My
Okay.
apologies.
And I'm here. So we have no, San Antonio flag, sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no ceremonies, proclamations. We have any citizen comments? I see we do. DJ Ruger and Vickie Yates. Come on down.
Item 4 already. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is DJ Ruger. I'm a resident of Oregon City. I'm here as a private citizen. I'm here to speak about the Patriot Day event that we have organized here in our city. Many of you may know that we already had one a year ago, and some of you didn't make it. So I'm here to try and encourage everybody to be there. It will be on September 11th at the Circle of Honor at the county buildings on the Red Soil campus. I think it's 105 Beaver Creek Road. It's about a 45-minute program at 6 p.m. I'm sorry.
If you want to sit
Would you like
down,
me to sit
they're
down?
trying to get you on the mic. Yeah.
Okay.
My apologies.
I will sit down.
Thank you.
Sorry. Is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
All right, here comes Vickie. All right.
Okay, so 18 months ago, an ad hoc committee of citizens got together and realized there was no public remembrance in Oregon City in the evening when people with families and jobs could come. So we lashed up this program with help from our local police, fire, and last year we focused primarily on recognizing not only the victims and the first responders, but also the military and what's happened to them in the intervening years. This year we're focusing almost exclusively on firefighters after the remembrance of what occurred on 9/11/2001. So I'm here to ask you to join us, be a part of it. Let us recognize you if you're there. And please, spread the word to the community. Thank you again for your consideration. I understand you had a work session scheduled for that evening. I hope you'll postpone it or reschedule it so that you can be there. We very much want to double at least our attendance. Last year, we had about 150 people. We have honor guards from the fire departments, the various police departments. We have chief of police, we have the Highland Guard from the Portland Police coming down. We have the high school band. We have the JROTC. We also have a fire chief, battalion chief from up in Portland coming down. If you remember the gas explosion last year, we're going to recognize that lieutenant for his outstanding service in saving all those lives. We're going to talk about the Eagle Creek fire. We're also going to talk about the loss of lives with the hot shots down in Arizona. Next year, we'll concentrate on law enforcement, and then we'll rotate through again. If there's any questions, if not, I want to thank you for letting me come here this evening.
Thank you.
Yeah, I attended that last year, and how you managed to coordinate all of that, just like you're going to do this year, it's amazing.
We had a tremendous
great
amount of
job.
help from the community.
Yeah, great job. Good.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Ms. Yates?
Hello, my name is Vickie Yates. I own a business in Oregon City, and I also live in Oregon City. And I am a co-founder, along with Carol Pauley, of the Midtown Business District. And we are a group of more than 90 businesses that are located on the top of the elevator along the 7th Street corridor. I'm here to talk about the tourism plan. I was on the elevator committee for about a year, along with Trieste Andrews, who is with the Three Rivers Artists Guild. And we were very happy to be included in that and made a lot of progress, we thought. Then the committee was disbanded, understandably, because grants were gotten and consultants got involved. So our work was set aside, and now we have the consultants that you've heard from this evening. We are very supportive and excited about the work that's being done on the elevator. You heard a little bit from the consultant who was here. What you didn't hear is that he actually had Phantom of the Opera tickets tonight in Seattle. He was taking his 22-year-old daughter and got on an airplane to come down to talk to you, and I'm really glad he got to give you that little bit of specific information. So we're pleased with the direction that's going. But those of us in Midtown are concerned, as well as people further up the hill, that the tourism plan that you discussed tonight, the 56-page plan, is really downtown and DOCA-centric. And frankly, many of us who aren't downtown feel like we always have to be in there trying to be the squeaky wheel to get heard, because Oregon City is more than just downtown. And a good example of that is that in the report, it lists it talks about what the brand is. And they have a page that looks like it's going to be, it's got pictures, so it looks like it's going to be in a brochure. And under attraction, all it says about Oregon City is, once the end of the Oregon Trail, we now boast an historic Main Street where you can enjoy a Northwest-style selection of food and drink, take in views of Willamette Falls and the historic bridge. While you're here, ride the unique municipal elevator. Our city doesn't stop at the top of the elevator. We have the heritage houses. We have the promenade with great views of the falls. We have the Carnegie Library, the beautiful Posey windows in the Unitarian Church, the Environmental Learning Center, the Observatory, the Rose Farm. I mean, I could go on and on. So I would just ask that as the tourism plan progresses, that you consider that downtown is not the only place in Oregon City. And I will say, I live on the Bluff. I'm very supportive. I love our downtown. I'm really happy about what's happened downtown, and I hope it continues. But other parts of the city need to be included in tourism.
Thank you. Good. Thanks, Vicki.
Okay, anybody else? All right. It's our last chance, Mr. Gifford. All right.
Thanks for waiting.
Moving on to public hearings. Everybody okay with the agenda?
Yes, sir.
All right, so PC 18-108, first reading of ordinance number 18-1012, revising chapter 2.30, Citizen Involvement Committee of this Oregon City Municipal Code. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. Christina Robertson-Gardner, our senior planner.
Thank you, Ms. Turway. So as you know, the CIC is a city committee made up of representatives from 12 neighborhood associations. Neighborhood associations are not entities of the city, and many of them have their own grievance process. On October 2nd of last year, the CIC adopted their work plan, which looked at reviewing the grievance process that's in their code to see if it needs to be revised or removed. They presented their findings to the City Commission at the July work session, and I'd like to just real briefly read a couple sentences from their findings. In absence of authority over the neighborhood associations, no action or finding by a grievance committee has any power or any method of enforcement behind it. Therefore, the CIC should recommend to the City Commission that Code Section 2.30060 grievances be removed from the code in its entirety. Citizens should be encouraged to use the public comment process as well as mediation services provided by Clackamas County Resolution Services or other steps as allowed by law. So at the July 10th City Commission work session, the City Commission recommended that staff come back for public hearing. So we have an ordinance this evening with Exhibit A, which shows the grievance section removed from the city code, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, so was that the staff report?
That's the staff report.
Then I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anybody wishing to testify? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 18-1012, removing chapter 2.30.060 grievances from the Oregon City Municipal Code.
Seconded.
Moved by Commissioner Hyde, seconded by Commissioner O'Donnell. Further discussion? Call roll.
Mayor.
Sorry, Mr. Geisman.
Ordinance number 18-1012, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City revising Chapter 2.30 Citizen Involvement Committee of the Oregon City Municipal Code.
Call roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. Okay, 6B, 18-374, first reading of ordinance number 18-1008, extending public facility strategy for the Hazelwood Drive sewer system. Who's in for Lewis? There we go. Miss Goodrich.
Good evening, Mayor Holliday and Commissioners. In 2014, the city adopted an ordinance to place a moratorium on building permits for new sanitary sewer permits for connections to the system due to capacity issues. And over the past 4 years, there's been extensions of that moratorium for 4 different areas and the lifting of 3 of those 4 areas. We've also passed ordinances for corrective actions, putting together plans for capital improvements to construct, to mitigate for those deficiencies. And in 2016, we put together a public strategy, facility strategy, and adopted an ordinance for that. Public facility strategy will be expiring, and the last area for the moratorium is, the status of that is it's under design, and one phase of it is under construction. So we are wanting to extend that public facility strategy so that we can complete the construction of the capital improvements that will lift the final moratorium, which is for the Hazelwood area. So this ordinance is for extending the public facility strategy for the Hazelwood area so that we can complete that project in 2019.
Questions?
So that's the extension time is 2019, Alita, or?
The extension time for this ordinance would take it out to the end of 2019.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve the first reading of ordinance number 18-1008.
Before we go there, it is listed as a public hearing.
Okay. Oh, why is that? All right. I'll open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to testify? Close the public hearing. Motion.
Okay, move to approve the first reading of the ordinance number 18-1008, extending public facility strategy for the Hazelwood Drive sewer system.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Shaw, second by Commissioner Hyde. Mr. Geisman.
Ordinance number 18-1008, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City extending a public facility strategy for the Hazelwood Drive sewer system.
Call roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Commissioner Ide,
Aye.
Mayor Holliday.
Aye. On to general business, 18-382, second reading of ordinance 18-1011, annexation of 0.96 acres at 19405 South End Road. Ms. Turway.
Thank you very much. I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
And to keep in mind, this was because of a sewer failure that they're annexing, just for clarification.
And the requirement by the ORS that anybody who has a failing system within 300 feet of a line has to be annexed.
Correct.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve second reading of ordinance number 18-1011, annexation of .96 acres at 19405 South End Road.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hyde, seconded by Commissioner Shaw. Mr. Wiseman?
Ordinance number 18-1011, an ordinance of the City of Oregon City approving annexation proposal number AN 18-0001 and approving the annexation of certain property located at 19405 South End Road to the City of Oregon City.
Call roll.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. 18-371, Architectural Services Contract with FFA Architecture and Interiors for the Police and Municipal Courts Building Chief Band.
Good evening, Mayor, Commission. As promised, we have the architect contract for you. We could have named it melatonin, because if you read it, it shares a lot of the traits of melatonin.
I actually did read it.
FFA is the firm that came out as number one in our selection, and we took their bid and with our project manager and Mr. Kabizman and my staff did a bunch of gentle work on the contract and their price, and we're at something everybody's comfortable with. I think it's a good value for the city, and I think they're a great design firm, and I'll answer any questions you have, but I think I gave you hopefully enough information the last time we talked about this topic.
I don't have any questions, but I want to be really, really clear that I don't want to be the Portland Public Schools.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
So, you know.
We won't be.
We got a number.
Yeah, my word.
Let's stick to the number. All right. Anybody else?
No, and having kind of gone not through this process of the architectural firm, but knowing what happened there, of the minds getting together and doing this, and this is the advantage of hiring that project manager ahead of time. That firm was crucial to getting this price to where it's comfortable to where we can do this building now. So,
okay,
if we can just keep the material costs and labor costs down, it's going to be better. So,
is there a motion?
Move to approve architectural services contract with FFA Architecture and Interiors Incorporated for the Police and Municipal Courts Building.
Is there any further discussion? Oh, is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Shaw, second by Commissioner O'Donnell. Is there further discussion? Call roll, please.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Anybody want to pull anything from consent agenda?
No.
Is there a motion?
Motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hyde, seconded by Commissioner O'Donnell.
I was waiting for the music.
Call the roll, please.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw?
Aye.
Commissioner Ide?
Aye.
Mayor Holliday?
Aye. Mr. Manager?
Just two quick updates. Going to call up Mr. Phil Lewis to talk about the pool and some upcoming closures that we have scheduled.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, just want to give you an update in the general public that the pool will be closed for our annual maintenance period beginning September 1st. This year is going to be a little bit longer than usual. Typically, we close down to do minor repairs, clean up, and get things ready for the winter season after the busy summer season. This year, we are doing a construction project for the concrete deck and steel column repair work, which which is going to take about 2 months. So the pool will be closed from September 1st through through October 31st. Major completion will be done around October 21st with a little wiggle room just in case. So general public have been made aware. It's been all of our postings and communicated very clearly to the public, but wanted to make sure that as we're approaching September 1st that the commission knows and the general public knows.
I haven't seen a post on Facebook.
We're still a couple weeks out. So we'll start ramping up the social media postings within the week just before.
Okay.
How will that be accomplished? Who does that?
That'd be through our recreation program. So Rochelle Enderholm Parsh and Melissa Tierney typically do the social media postings.
I assume in conjunction with Ms. Brown.
I would hope.
Yes, exactly.
That was the question.
And then working with Ms. Brown as well on the overall for the Oregon City Hall page as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
So we had a presentation earlier tonight, an invitation to the event on September 11th. That's a work session night. I guess looking for a little direction from the commission, we have a small cell work session. We had 2 agenda items that night. We could bring one that if we started at 5, be done by 5:30, give you a half an hour to get up there, or would you just rather we cancel the work session and this isn't a time-sensitive work session? Yeah.
I would like to see us postpone the work session.
I agree.
I'm good with that.
Okay, that's all my updates for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna go first today. Having had some discussions over the last several months with several different folks, I used my authority and instructed the city manager that we will have an ordinance on the first meeting in September to add all of the parks that we can on an ordinance so that they come under the jurisdiction of Chapter 10 of City Charter. So we'll be seeing that on the first meeting in September.
The ones that are ready, yes.
And the great majority of them, right?
There's a lot of title work that needs to go on. We will bring all of them that we have that we are comfortable to bring forward.
Well, we've been talking about this for over 2 years, and I can't imagine why it takes 2 years to do title reports on some properties. So this is going to be a high priority of mine. I'm going to be riding this horse until we put it in the barn. So let's get the work done. Okay?
Understood.
All right. Anybody else?
No, I'm going to wait until that next work session.
So,
Commissioner Shaw?
I attended that Brew Fest since they moved it down to the EOT. I'm trying to figure out how they did that and had the first City Festival, I think, at the same time on Main Street after seeing how packed that was down there. Oh my gosh. I think it was a good success story just to have attention to the local breweries around here and stuff. It gave them a lot of exposure.
Actually, the first Cities Festival was the weekend before. It was the
But they used to have it at the same time on Main Street.
Right, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And that was a disaster.
So, real success story there. And National Night Out, I think it was a success story, even though it was 110 degrees or whatever. So, and so I did a boat tour with Jerry Herman's group last Saturday. And I think Commissioner O'Donnell, you're up for this Saturday, aren't you, for this? And I'm not sure who else, somebody else. I think Commissioner Mengelberg is too, but he puts about 10 people on this, one of the new electric boats from the electric boat company that now has, you can rent these for the Willamette River. And I tell you, that the boat itself is pretty interesting just because you can actually do it yourself. There's no, hand you the keys and you go. And of course you can only go like 6 knots or something. So, but Jerry had several kind of consultants on there and gave us a tour of all the mitigation and restoration projects that have been going on and potential projects that could happen along the just the mouth of the Clackamas. We couldn't go up the Clackamas, but just the mouth of Clackamas on up to the falls. So, and he's going to be doing that again this Saturday for another 10 or 12 people. So was a great program, and I appreciate Jerry Herman putting that all together, so it was very good. Thanks.
Is that it? So, go ahead.
Something that just happened that piqued my interest. You know, Phil was up here talking about communication, and I want to make sure we're not underutilizing the position of communications director. Coordinator. And my request is that at some point, whether it be at a city commission meeting or a work session, that our coordinator comes up and gives a brief public presentation, mainly for the benefit of the people at home, as to how to interact with that position, what social media she's available on or monitoring, rumor control activities, and mainly it's for the benefit of the public. If you have the best tool in the box and people don't know how to use it, it's of no use. So if that sounds like a reasonable request, I don't care if it takes 5 minutes to get up here some night and just say, here's my position, here's how I use it, here's how you access me, and here are the activities I'm engaged with, and here's how we convey information and encourage that flow of information back and forth from the public to the city.
Okay. So finally, for me, I know that folks have been wondering why I had not filed for re-election. I've been waiting patiently for an announcement that I'm now able to make, and that is that there has been executed a purchase and sale agreement for the Blue Heron Mill site from Falls Legacy LLC. We cannot currently announce who the new owner will be, as they're in a due diligence period looking at the title reports and those kinds of things. But I'm very confident that this is a sale that's going to go through, and we'll be very happy with the new ownership group and their ability to perform at a very high level moving forward on the private development of the site. So I have filed for re-election, and that is my major announcement, and we will move on from there.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put forward my congratulations. That's a major stepping stone and a hurdle to overcome. And it goes right back to our initial presentation tonight on tourism development. If we can accelerate that plan, let's all get in step and let's deliver all the deliverables. So congratulations, Mayor, and a job well done.
Thanks, sir. Anything else? And we're adjourned.